In this video, I will detail how to set up a firewall on a virtual machine, this time, using VMware Workstation. Previously, I did a video about setting up a firewall using VirtualBox from Oracle and I got a few requests asking for VMware, so here it is. Before going into the details, allow me to tell you why a firewall running on a virtual machine might be important. Internet access on your computer is very likely to be through a router provided by your ISP. That router, however, has very limited firewall functionalities, if any at all. Using a virtual machine, you can have a sophisticated firewall running, and have your computer and your virtual machines behind that firewall. Also, you might want internet access through a VPN. The firewall which I am about to show you provides that functionality out of the box. There are a few things you need to get in advance. First, you need VMware Workstation. On the footnotes, you can find a link to download a 30-day trial. It will have all the functionalities you need. For the firewall itself, we are going to use pfSense provided by Netgate. At some point, you might want to buy their firewall hardware. But in the meantime, what we are about to do will give a true sense of the pfSense firewall functionalities at a minimal cost. So, to install pfSense on a virtual machine, you will need to download the ISO image file from the Netgate website. Check the link in the footnotes. And that's all. Let's do this. First, allow me to show you the setup I have. I have a laptop with a USB network adapter connected to a router using an Ethernet cable. It is very important to have a USB network adapter, so that we can use the USB pass-through functionality. The router is the one provided by my ISP for internet access. On my laptop, I will create a special host-only network. You will see later why is special. This network will be used to connect my firewall VM to the host operating system, running on my laptop, and eventually to other VMs. The USB network adapter will be connected directly to the firewall using USB pass-through. Because of that, it will not be available to the host operating system, and until the firewall is up and running, the laptop will not have internet access. Okay, let's do some work. First, allow me to show which VMware Workstation version I'm using. As you can see, I'm using version 16.2.1. Before creating the virtual machine, we need to create that special host-only network I mentioned in the introduction. For that, we need to open the virtual network editor. We will need to change the settings and, as you can see, we will need administrator privileges for that. Here it is shown all the networks managed by VMware, which are the ones created when VMware Workstation was installed. To create a new host-only network, let's hit that Add Network button. Please make note of this name, VMnet2, it will be used later. Okay, we have a new host-only network. The DHCP service is enabled. Because we will be using the DHCP server from the firewall, we will need to disable this one. Now, allow me to change the IP range. This is a personal preference, feel free to keep the default or to use any other range of your preference. Okay, the host-only network is created. We now need to change a few settings. For that, we need to open the network connections, which can be done by running the command ncpa.cpl. The first thing we are going to do is to change the network name using a single word. This will be handy soon. Now let's change some properties. The first thing is to change the IP address to automatic, because we will be using the firewall's DHCP server. Then, we can disable IPv6, we don't need it. And that's all here. There is one more thing though. Remember that I mentioned that this was a special host-only network? That was because these host-only networks are not seen as normal networks by the host operating system. We need to change that. We need the host operating system to handle this network as any other network. For that, we need to go to the registry. And then, go to this key. You have it in the video notes. Now, search for VMNet2, which was the name assigned by VMware when the network was created. Okay, here it is. The type of the network is defined by this key. Currently, its value is 1. We need to change it to 0. And that's all we need to do here. This host-only network will be handled as any other network. We just need to restart the computer at some point. Another thing that will be useful is the MAC address of the USB network adapter, which is currently being used for internet access. To find that, let's open the command prompt and run the command ipconfig/all. Let's scroll up until we find the network adapter. Here it is. And here's the MAC address. Let's save it. We can close the command prompt. One last thing before creating the virtual machine. We will need to use USB pass-through to connect the USB network adapter to the virtual machine. Unlike VirtualBox, this cannot be done using the user interface provided by VMware. Instead, we will need to edit the VM configuration file manually, and for that, we need some details of the network adapter. Those details are the vendor ID and product ID. To find these, we need to open the device manager. Under Network Adapters, let's right-click on the network adapter we want and select Properties. Then, go to the Details tab and select Hardware IDs. And here is the vendor ID and product ID. Let's make a note of these values. I will write this in a way that will be useful later. We can close everything. We are now ready to create the VM. I strongly advise you to create a folder for the virtual machine, and that's what I will be doing now. This is the default folder for my VMs, and here I will create a folder named Firewall for the VM. Before continuing, allow me to ask for your assistance. If the contents of this video are helpful, a coffee will allow me to continue to build this work. Please go to ko-fi.com, that is, ko-fi.com/hardpath, and buy me one there. And if you can share this video, I would be grateful. Thank you. Let's go back to where we were. Let's create a new virtual machine. Let's start by selecting a custom configuration. We can accept the defaults, and let's select to install the operating system later. Now, pfSense is based on FreeBSD version 12. So, let's select FreeBSD 12, 64-bit. The machine name will be Firewall, which matches the folder we created previously. I will assign 2 processors and 2 GB of memory. For the network, let's select host only, which is the default one. Later, we will change it to the one we created. Now, this is for the hard drive, we can accept the defaults. We need to create a new one, and the only thing we will need to change is this. Use a single file. And that's all here. We need to change a few things. First, we need to attach the pfSense ISO file, which I have in my Downloads folder. Now, we need to use the host-only network we created. Because my USB network adapter is USB 3, I need to change the USB controller to 3.1. And that's all here. Now, let's configure the USB pass-through. For that, we need to go to the folder that holds the virtual machine files. In there, we need to locate the configuration file, which has the extension VMX. This is a text file, we can open it using Notepad. At the very end, let's type USB.AutoConnect. Device 0 equal to open quotes and type the vendor ID and product ID we have. Close quotes and save the file. Now, before we start the virtual machine, note that the laptop has internet connection. Let's start the virtual machine. We immediately have a warning notifying us that a USB device will be unplugged from the laptop. This is expected and a good sign, it means that the USB pass-through is working. Let's wait for the boot process to finish. Notice that the laptop lost the internet connection. And that's because the USB network adapter is being used exclusively by the virtual machine. Okay, we can accept the copyright notice and press Enter to start the install. Select the keyboard. And now I will partition the disk automatically and use BIOS, it is the simplest way. Press Enter and the installation will start. The installation is done. We can press Enter since we do not need to modify anything at this stage. And we can press Enter again to reboot. The virtual machine will reboot, this time using the hard disk. The first thing we are asked is about the creation of virtual networks. For now, we don't need to create any virtual network, so let's type N and press Enter. Okay, now we can see both network adapters seen by the virtual machine. The first one, EM0, is the one attached to the host-only network. The other one, UE0, is the USB network adapter connected to the VM using USB pass-through. The question we have now is about the interface to be used to access the Internet or wide area network. This will be the USB interface, labeled as UE0. So, let's type that and press Enter. Now we need to define which interface will be used for the local area network. The only one we have available is the one labeled EM0. So, let's type that and press Enter. This is for us to double-check that everything is okay, which it is. Okay, this is the last stage of the installation. Because my router supports IPv6, this is bringing some issues with the firewall, not sure why. To deal with this, I will disable IPv6 on the USB network adapter. For now, I will speed up the video. Okay, and the installation is completed. We now need to adjust a few things, including disabling IPv6 on the USB adapter. For that, we will use the web interface provided by the firewall and available on the host-only network. As we can see on the screen, the IP address of the firewall on the host-only network is 192.168.1.1. To be able to access that IP address, we need the laptop to have an IP address on that range. So, let's check that, using the command prompt and ipconfig. As you can see, we need an IP address in the 1.1 range. So, let's open the network connection and go to the properties of our host-only network. Let's go to the IPv4 properties, and let's put their any address in the 192.168.1 range. Please ensure that the address you enter here is not used somewhere else. We can close everything and open the browser. Let's type the address of the firewall and press enter. There is an issue with the certificate, but for now, we can press advanced and then continue. If you want to know how to solve this, please get in touch. We have access to the web interface of the firewall. We now need to enter the default credentials. The username is admin. And the password is pfSense, all in lowercase. We now have a few configuration steps to go through. The first thing is to define the hostname. For me, because the firewall will be the gateway to the internet, I will name it GW. Because I have a domain, I will use it, with intranet as prefix. Feel free to accept the default or enter one of your preferences. For the primary DNS server, I will use Google's. For the secondary, I will use Cloudflare's. I will uncheck this because I want to use the DNS servers above and not the ones provided by my router. I will accept the default time server. Now, this is the wide area interface. I would advise you to put here the MAC address we got for the USB adapter. And that's what I'll do. We need to check the format of the MAC address here. It is not exactly the same we got before. So, let me change that. Okay, that's the MAC address. And nothing else needs changing here. Now, this is the IP address of the firewall on the host-only network. Because I usually use range 1 for my field devices, I will put the firewall on the 10 range. Also, and now this is a personal preference, I prefer to set 254 for the last octet. We shouldn't leave the default admin password. So let's change it. Okay, and that's all for now. Let's reboot the firewall. I found it faster if we go to the console and reboot it there. For that, let's go with option 5. Okay, let's wait for the firewall to reboot. Reboot done. We can see that now we have an IPv4 address on the USB adapter. Now, I only want to disable IPv6. For that, I need to go back to the web interface. As you can see, I do not have access. And the reason is the IP address of the laptop. Let's check that. Okay, we still have the address we have set manually. So, let's open the network connections. And use the DHCP server of the firewall to set the address. If we do ipconfig again, we now have a DNS suffix and an IP address in the 10 range. Okay, let's open the browser and access the firewall. All good so far. Okay, I can see that the firewall has internet connection. So, allow me just to disable IPv6 on the USB Ethernet adapter. Let's apply changes. Changes applied. Remember that I said we need to reboot the laptop at some point to apply the changes made to the host-only network. Now, it is a good time for that. So, let's close the browser and in the console, use option 6 to shut down the virtual machine. Machine shutdown. Now, before rebooting the laptop, let me take a snapshot of the firewall. Okay, let's reboot the laptop now. Okay, let's start the virtual machine again. Same thing as before. Next time you might want to check that checkbox. Okay, we now only have IPv4 addresses. Let's check the IP address of the laptop with ipconfig. Okay, no IP address. So let's renew it and see what we'll get. Here it is, new IP address and gateway, and as you can see, the host operating system detected internet connection. So, let's test that. Okay, all good. That's the firewall up and running. If you found this video useful, I would love to have a coffee from you. Please go to ko-fi.com, that is, ko-fi.com/hardpath, and buy me one there. Also, please share this video, that would be highly appreciated. Feel free to reach me on social media. On LinkedIn, my profile can be found at this address. But it will be on Twitter that you will hear from me more often.